Yeah, it's Bene. Thank you and welcome back to Inside an Indian Country and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Wesley Benally, National Tribal Practice Leader at REDW. Today I'm honored to welcome James Siva, Vice Chairman of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians and Chairman of the California Nations Indian Gaming Association. James brings a unique perspective as both an elected tribal leader and gaming industry advocate. Born and raised on the Morongo Indian Reservation, he has dedicated his career to advancing economic opportunities that align with tribal values of self-reliance and self-determination. Welcome to the podcast, James.
Thank you so much for having me, Wesley. I appreciate the opportunity.
No, I know you're a very busy guy. You mentioned that you just actually got back from Sinaga. Did you have a good time in that?
Yeah, absolutely. In February is when Sinaga hosts our annual conference, the Western Indian Gaming Conference. Um, Spanned it over 4 days from Monday through Thursday, so it was a wonderful event. We had a lot of amazing people. But yeah, just coming off of those 4 days, having to go, it's a bit exhausting. But I'm happy to be on here. Always happy to be able to continue to do what we do best, which is advocate on behalf of our tribal nations. Speak up. Um, One of my favorite quotes I always have to start with and try to end with as well is the whole thing that we're doing here is trying to protect tribal sovereignty, and the
Mm-hmm.
best way to do that is to enact tribal sovereignty through action, not just words, but doing the right thing. And so that's what I try to do. And these kind of opportunities, I feel like, are exactly doing that, like using your words to enact the protection of tribal sovereignty. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I look forward to the podcast and the conversations.
No, for sure. Definitely, definitely actions, really speak to what we have. And, obviously now we have platforms like this to really communicate that with the masses. And so that's pretty cool. So, as a tribal council member and, the chairman of CNIGA, with respect to tribal gaming, you have different perspectives, that you can share, and which is great. And so, how is this kind of dual vision, or it seemed kind of, from a tribal leader's perspective, and then, also being on the other component of it and advocating for not just your tribe, but, all the tribes in California and, probably moving nationally as well. What do you kind of see as your vision, and what appears to be the future for gaming?
Yeah, particularly here in California, there's a lot of eyes on California, not just from within the state, but nationally, even internationally. Just due to the size of our market, the number of gaming facilities, the size of the industry here, the future here, I think, is very bright, but it also has a lot of potential threats to our industry. And so for me, at least I have to always switch back and forth with hats, like you're talking about, like from Morongo to Sinaga. From the Sinaga perspective, our goal right now is trying to build consensus on whatever that future looks like a gaming, whether we're talking about how to roll out and utilize AI more efficiently in our gaming facilities or even in our tribal governments as well. Um, or whether we're talking about sports betting, which was a huge issue here, it still is. The What we're trying to do is build consensus, and we're trying to do it very, very carefully. But that means we're having a lot of tough conversations. Because for me, it's one meeting at a time, it's one conversation at a time, um, and trying to build unity. But even with that, trying to reshape what that means. The idea of unity. It's not just unanimous support or unanimous agreement on a single issue, but really defining the principles of who we are as an industry. And even if we disagree, if we hold to those principles, we will find that path forward. So for me, that's the goal of what I've been working on the last. Oh, I just talked about this. Oh, it's been 6 years since I first got elected as chair of Sinaga, and that's been my goal from the beginning. And it's been a lot of hard work and a lot of mistakes on my part. Not being prepared in the right way for meetings and learning from those mistakes. And I try to give myself space to make those mistakes, but I hold myself accountable not to make the same mistake twice. That take each one as a learning opportunity and to grow from that.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that vision is seen by others, and those messages are received and believed. And I think we've seen that, at least with the Sinaga level. We've grown our membership from 32 member tribes when I first joined to now 53, which is a huge percentage, and I'm incredibly proud of that fact. But I remind the association, this is their association, this is their work. I'm just here to be their voice and advocate. But that's been kind of how, from the Sinaga side, how I've approached this.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. And it seems like, you're taking a lot from what, you've probably learned as far as, your community values and, what's you've learned over time. And so, obviously a lot of commercial success and success from that standpoint. And so when, talking about, moving forward and seeing the future, how do you balance the two? Is there, something that you need to maybe at times, think about, or, what kind of drives you to just understand that, yes, hey, and this is something that we kind of always talk about, here and there. And I'm sure you've had those conversations as well, is that tribes make different business decisions, not always because the dollar makes sense, but because whether or not it's beneficial for the community or for the people, And so if you can maybe talk a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, and that's something that, like with Morongo, we always try to make sure like that our core values are represented in what we do, even in the business world. Um, Even going back to gaming, like Morongo's been involved in gaming from as early on as possible. Morongo was one of the two tribes that were part of the Supreme Court case known as the Cabazon decision. It was Cabazon and Morongo. We've been there from the very beginning. But even that entry into gaming was a very difficult decision for the tribe to make. A lot of members at that time felt like it wasn't representative of our values to move into an area like gaming. So we spent a lot of time that even after that vote was decided, and it was very close. I think it was passed by 2 votes. So like, who knows what our future would have looked like, and our current situation would have looked like if it had gone the other way. But even going into gaming, we're like, we're going to do this differently. We're not going to do it looking purely at dollars. We're going to try to do this in a way that we're entering an industry that has a lot of negative aspects to it, but we're going to find a way to put our values of being responsible, about caring about our community, about valuing the segments of our community that need the most care, our elders, our children. um, and so those are the things that we've tried to maintain throughout our entry into gaming and now into other areas. We've been fortunate enough to have quite a bit of success in the gaming realm that's allowed us to move into things like hospitality and energy development and financial management and such. But again, those core values of doing the right thing for the right reasons, and sometimes having to sacrifice financially because it doesn't match up with our values, which is very tough to do when you know that this has a potential to be very, very beneficial for us, but we choose not to do it because that's not who we are as a people. I remember, to give an example of that, when some of these uh, payday loan businesses were approaching different tribes. We were one of them that they talked to, and we looked at it very seriously because it did have a big economic upside to it. But after sitting with it and talking to our people about it, we decided collectively as a tribe that this wasn't an area that we wanted to get into, that we felt like this was a bit too exploitative, and we couldn't find a way to make sure that our values were going to be held up and represented in that field. And so we chose not to do it, and we probably lost out on quite a bit of financial security for the tribe in that at that time. But again, we were willing to literally put our actions behind our beliefs and do that. And so I remember all of those stories, and I remember how carefully we talk about things. And so I try to take that with me as I move forward. And I've been blessed to be in leadership here at Morongo for the last now 11 years, starting in 2025. Same with C9. I've made mistakes along the way, and I try to hold myself accountable. But I also try to just remember, like, this is bigger than me, and this is bigger than the current leadership group we have, and we have to make sure that we're holding our values for the future, so that that next generation of leaders can come and do the same thing, and have that space to even make mistakes. But if they can make sure that they're holding that remembrance of who we are as a people moving forward and letting that be the lens that they look at things through, I think we'll be very successful moving forward, regardless of, maybe missed opportunities here or there.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's pretty cool, man. I think, when we're working with, there's always uh questions about people who don't know the tribal world, if you will, and why a certain decision was it made, and stuff, examples like that specifically, or when pops out, it's just a different mindset about growth and how that's done. And that's a perfect example. That's pretty cool. Yeah, because there were several instances, in my career and whatnot, moving around, and the accounting slash financial world, where you did see that, where
Mm.
those payday loans, and you're like, oh man, understand, that it is an opportunity, but is it really for the benefit of your future,
Mhm.
people, and so that's a good point. And you also mentioned, your tribe is very, you know, um, prospective looking and innovative, and whatnot, especially when looking at economic diversification outside of, gaming. And so you mentioned a couple of opportunities you guys, jumped on, and really been successful at. So if there was maybe younger leaders, thinking about, their leadership position or get into leadership positions, what type of advice would you have as far as economic diversification goes, and how they could frame that for their tribe, and really, obviously gaming is great, and it's a good source of revenue, but what does diversifying that mean, and what have you learned from it?
Yeah. And I think particularly here in California, what you see a lot as the kind of representative of tribal gaming, or like the viewpoint of California tribal gaming, are facilities like ours, like at Morongo or San Manuel or Pachanga, like these really large resort style facilities. But the reality is, majority of tribal facilities here in the state are small to medium sized, rural. So diversification is even more important for those tribes and those peoples, for that those next generations of leaders looking at how to best approach it. I think it's really going to have to be understanding what other resources your tribe has. Do you have a land base that can sustain, maybe it's moving into hospitality or doing some energy development projects, which I think is a major focus of a lot of tribes, and I think there's a lot of potential. Although with the new change in administration, some of those federal grant dollars for those green energy projects are now kind of up in the air, or maybe just completely off the table.
Yeah.
But regardless, that's just now, right now. But looking in the future, I think energy has a huge upside for a lot of tribes. But then it just comes back to kind of those case by case basis. Like, we're fortunate here at Morongo to have probably the largest land base in Southern California of any tribe. We have roughly just under 50,000 acres of trust land available for us. And some other tribes here, I know of one tribe down in the San Diego area that up until recently had less than 25 acres of trust land, and that was for their entire people. So diversifying for them is different. They have to move into things that aren't land based, which is doable, like financial management. We were owners and operators of the broker dealer in New York for a number of years. That was a new venture for us and didn't require using our land here. But again, it was about resources. I think you just lean on where your location is. Also, the expertise of your people. Like, we bring in a lot of different people, even within our tribe, who have gone out and garnered a level of expertise in different areas. Our current chief administrative officer, who's a tribal member, and my cousin, he grew up and went to school and was in our fire department and was our fire chief. And so we are able to utilize his knowledge. And now we're doing a groundbreaking deal with Global Medical Response, which is able to provide expanded ambulance service for both our people and the surrounding communities, but as a business agreement where we're making revenue from this now, but we wouldn't have had that opportunity without leaning and trusting on the expertise of your individual members. So I think, it's more than just like the traditional kind of idea of like leadership, like your
Yeah.
council, your business committee. Like there's a lot of people with a lot to offer within your individual tribe. So um, when you're, for me, it's partly like you're looking to grow outward, but you got to start by looking inward because there's
Yeah.
a lot there first.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, that's pretty cool. You really definitely got to look inward, and sometimes all the best advice comes from within, and that's a good point. With kind of sticking with, if you will, kind of your younger generation, and really thinking about you know what's important to them, and what what do you kind of see as far as just preferences come with respect to, we could say either issues, and even maybe just stick, if you want, to like even gaming, as far as like their entertainment preferences, right? And
Mm,
obviously, from that perspective, brick and mortar type of facilities aren't always,
yeah.
interesting. You see them always on their phones and all that. So I'm just kind of curious on what your thoughts are, kind of that type of entertainment, if that's something that there's discussions starting to, kind of circle about, and, just kind of curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely a problem that like not just like tribes are facing or tribal gaming, but like all industries is how to appeal to Gen Z and what's the next Gen Alpha, which is even coming up behind Gen Z, and how they absorb information is completely different than past generations. Like you said, they're attached to that phone. That phone is with them all the time. And so like looking at it from the gaming perspective, we've definitely had to adjust how we're disseminating that information, how our marketing strategies differ. It can't just be the kind of traditional TV buys or even the way that they've done it in the past, decade on social media. We've had to, move some more of our marketing dollars into platforms that we previously weren't using, like TikTok and Snapchat, and you know, trying to find ways to engage with them, adjusting the entertainment types of acts we're bringing in that appeal to a younger audience. Even with the gaming portion, it's tough because you're trying to provide an experience for them because that's what they want. They want an experience. They don't want to just come and sit at the slot machines for a few hours or come and play blackjack. They want a full experience. They want to come and see a show or have a meal and something that's that's postable. Something that's Instagram worthy that they can
Yeah,
post
yeah,
and get the views for.
yeah,
So it's tough, but we've been trying to make changes here and there to make sure that we can appeal to that new crowd. And I think a lot of it comes into is how you're collecting your data, like how you're doing your market analysis to understand the breakdown of who your consumers are, whether it's at your gaming facility, whether it's at a travel center, a fuel center, whether it's at a restaurant that you own, understanding who is coming in and who your patrons are so you can best market to those groups. And we've seen a shift, over the last few years where, the boomers used to be the majority of the market for us, and now we've shifted it, and millennials are coming up and taking a bigger chunk of that, and we're seeing some more activity from groups like Gen Z, not so much Gen Alpha yet because they're still relatively young, but just trying to find the ways to appeal to as many market segments as possible, but also not alienate anyone else,
yeah,
because
yeah,
what a person from that generation of like the baby boomers wants, it's very different from what a person from Gen Z wants. But if you can give them similar offerings, even at the same restaurant, like if you have something that harkens back to like something that they're used to for the with the boomers, like a nice like prime rib special, whatever you have,
yeah,
but then you
yeah,
have something that's a little more, forward thinking and a little more postable, or
Yeah, right. Yeah.
do it for the gram, right? Do it for the gram.
Yeah.
Even that's outdated. I'm a millennial, and I'm showing because I'm more familiar with those two. And now, like, they're like, "Oh, no one's on Instagram anymore. That's for old people." I'm like, I was like, "Are you telling me I'm old officially now?" But
Yeah.
yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
But you got to understand your market, so you know
Yeah.
exactly how to make those
Yeah.
channels. Yeah,
That's a good point. Yep. I like that. Yeah, no. It's like it's similar here too. As an employer here in public accounting, we're having to kind of really identify the different generations and how they view like the kind of work we do, the client experience that we give, and all that good stuff. So yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. Um, so with your role in CNAG, I mean, really, you're obviously doing a lot of intertribal collaboration, and and what do you see as far as that really being, you know, um, a strength? Obviously, strength in numbers is always something that's talked about a lot, and um, how is that, you know, pushing nationally? I'm like you said, California is one of the, it's not the largest market, and how does that translate to really making an impact nationally?
yeah, yeah. I mean, California, as I always describe it, as far as like the travel gaming context, California is the heartbeat of travel gaming.
Mhm.
We have, even looking at just like pure like numbers coming down from like NIGC, like
Mhm.
overall industries, 41.8 billion travel gaming as an industry. California is 17 billion of that.
Yeah. Wow.
It is massive. It is
Yeah.
more than a quarter of the entire travel gaming industry. Um, and so just looking at pure numbers, like we are that heartbeat that drives the industry forward. And a lot of like the innovations that come into travel gaming come out of California. I always like to highlight like um the ticket in, ticket out system.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
standard now. That
Yeah.
was California tribes that developed that back in the day. And at the time, it would people are like, "That's never going to work. You can't just give your patrons a piece of paper."
Yeah.
But
Right.
no one could imagine a current casino still doing coin in, coin out without
Right.
the ticket system.
Right.
Like that was California tribes.
Yeah.
Like we've always been at the forefront, and we're always willing to push the envelope. Um, but we also know that with that kind of um, power or the size, like we have a lot that we're responsible for too. And if we do something that uh, has a negative impact, it won't just impact us here in California. Like those ramifications could go across the entire
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
So, like I talk about the size of our market and how big we are and how important we are, not to like put down other markets or to brag, but to say that with that kind of size, like we are very careful and responsible for what we do because we understand how important we are to our people here, to the state here, and also our position federally and nationally. Um, so it's a both complicated matter of recognizing that we are important and our size is incredible, but also that if we make a mistake, it will hurt not just us and our people, but potentially the entire industry.
Yeah.
So it comes with a lot of responsibility. And I try to make sure that the tribes here in California are aware of that we have this responsibility that reaches nationally. And we got to make sure we do the right thing for this industry, which, although technically didn't start here, I always say this is really the birthplace of travel gaming. Because without that Cabazon decision, you don't necessarily get to the Indian Gaming
Right.
Regulatory Act.
Right.
And without that framework, you don't really have an industry. You have like little hubs of people pushing up against current law back then. But without those fundamental things happening, there is not the industry as we know it today.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we have a responsibility as the birthplace of travel gaming to make sure we do the right thing.
Right. Right. No, that's really definitely a good point, James. And man, that's very, very articulate and kind of, especially recognizing the responsibility that comes with it, and that's pretty cool. And so I always like to leave off with just, if you had, we're talking on a platform, right? And we're talking about different generations and all that. And, if you had, the next upcoming, leaders, and we always talk about this, we definitely get involved a lot with unity, and, our push and focus is always about, okay, accounting and, finance and all that stuff. And, hopefully we make it a little interesting, man. Every time we're talking about that, everybody's yawning, but everybody wants to be an engineer or someone lawyer, whatnot. But if you had the next leader listening in today, and really just what kind of thoughts would you want to share with them, so that as they're making decisions or they're thinking about things, that it may resonate with them,
Yeah. And this is one thing I've thought a lot about, is like this next generation of leaders. Um, I know, like for me, like when I first got on council, I was the youngest council member that we had, and I've been on now. This is my 11th year, and I'm still the youngest person that we have on council. And for me, that's an issue. That's an absolute issue. Like I shouldn't be able to say that anymore. I don't want to be able to say that anymore. So for those next generation of leaders, don't feel like your age is a detriment. Don't feel like your lack of experience can hold you back, because you have a unique and fresh perspective. Go out and find the information that maybe you don't have. Ask the question. Ask the question every time. I don't know how many meetings when I first started out I held back and didn't ask a question, and that I regretted not asking it later.
Yeah.
Ask the question. And if you don't like the answer, make them explain why it is the right answer. I don't know how many times I would push back on things where the answer was, well, we've always done it that way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not an answer. That's an excuse.
Yeah.
That's not an answer. Like, you have to explain why. Just because we do it the same way every time does not mean it's right. And so be okay with being uncomfortable and asking those questions. You can do it respectfully. Like, I have huge respect for our elders. We've had a number of leaders here at Morongo who served our council for 30. One our former chairwoman served and is still serving on our council now. She's not chair anymore, but she's been on for 40 years.
Yeah.
And she's been a huge resource for me. But we don't always see eye to eye. Like, we push each other back and forth. She still takes me to school every once in a while at a meeting, and I see it, and I'm like, I'm going to remember this right here because I want to learn. I want to be able to give those lessons later on down the road. But just know that, like, even if you're a young person and you maybe are quote unquote inexperienced, you still have something to offer. You have a unique perspective, and don't sell yourself short. You can do this. Those people who came before us, they didn't know what they were doing either.
Yeah.
But look where we are now. So ask those questions.
Well, I'm fired up, James. We'll go out there, go get it now. Well, hey, thank you so much for sharing your vision and insights with us today, man. It's really great having you on the podcast. And everybody listening, please join us for any future episodes. We're continuing to explore how tribal gaming, and other opportunities it generates really it can serve as foundations for our next generation of leaders. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Ahead of this, I was going through and listening to some of the previous episodes that you had, and just such a wide range of amazing speakers, and it's such a great platform and podcast you've created. So I'm so thankful for the opportunity. I look forward to seeing future episodes and hearing more and more information. And
Yeah, man.
Thank you for all that you do, Wesley. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to getting leaders like you on a regular basis. Yeah, thank you so much, man. Thank you.